former member of the Weather Underground.
Real quick, Mr. Ayers, I don't care about an old washed-up terrorist, but as Senator Clinton said in her debates with you, we need to know the full extent of that relationship. We need to know the full extent of Senator Obama's relationship with Acorn, who is now on the verge of maybe perpetrating one of the greatest frauds in voter history in this country, maybe destroying the fabric of democracy. Same front outfit organization that your campaign gave $832,000 for quote, lighting and site selection. So all of these things need to be examined, right. Of course.
I'm going to let you respond. I think it's going to extend this.
It's going to be important to just, I'll respond to these two particular allegations that Senator McCain's made and that have gotten a lot of attention. In fact, Mr. Ayers has become the centerpiece of Senator McCain's campaign over the last 2 or 3 weeks. This has been their primary focus. So let's get the record straight. Bill Ayers is a professor of education in Chicago. 40 years ago, when I was 8 years old, he engaged in despicable acts with a radical domestic group. I have roundly condemned those acts. 10 years ago, he served and I served on a school reform board that was funded by one of Ronald Reagan's former ambassadors and close friends, Mr. Annenberg. Other members on that board were the presidents of the University of Illinois, the president of Northwestern University, who happens to be a Republican, the president of the Chicago Tribune, a Republican-leaning newspaper. Mr. Ayers is not involved in my campaign. He has never been involved in this campaign, and he will not advise me in the White House. So that's Mr. Ayers. Now, with respect to Acorn, Acorn is a community organization. Apparently what they've done is they were paying people to go out and register folks, and apparently some of the people who were out there didn't really register people, they just filled out a bunch of names. Had nothing to do with us. We were not involved. The only involvement I've had with Acorn was I represented them alongside the U.S. Justice Department in making Illinois implement a motor voter law that helped people get registered at DMVs.
Ralph Nader, 1 minute, your response, especially to the issue of Acorn, because this has now become a major issue as to whether there's voter fraud or voter suppression going on in this election.
Well, first of all, Acorn has done tremendously good work over the years with low-income people in city after city. When they go into big-time voter registration, things happen. Some people may get enthusiastic. They don't control some of the new people they hire, and this happens. It should not besmirch the overwhelming good work on economic justice and voice to low-income people. Second, on the Bill Ayers thing, who was a lapsed small-time saboteur with the Weather Underground many years ago. What should have been said was the big-time terrorists, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney. These are clinically verifiable mass terrorists who have killed innocent civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere in their criminal wars of aggression. These are criminal wars of aggression. These are war crimes. These are war criminals. They have killed over 1 million Iraqi civilians as a result of that criminal invasion. That's where the discussion should have focused on. The big-time terrorists, the state terrorists in the White House who have violated our Constitution, our statutes, and our international treaties, and have been condemned even by the American Bar Association for continual violence of our violation of our Constitution.
Cynthia McKinney.
First of all, I think I should say that I believe that the people in this country need a political party and a movement that places our values on the political agenda. Obviously, with that exchange, that's not the case. There's something else that's a bit more troubling. I've also been talking about election integrity as I've gone across this country. But, you know, I really don't like the idea that the face of election fraud, given the past 2 presidential elections, is now a face of color and one of poor people. In 2000, when people went to the polls, when the voters went to the polls. They were met with confusing ballots, manipulation of the voter lists, electronic voting machines that didn't work, inappropriately or ineffectively or poorly trained officials who weren't familiar with the workings of those machines. And we know what the problems with those machines have been and are. We still have those problems that have been with us since 2000. In 2004, they added to these problems with the electronic poll books, the sleepovers that were discovered, where the machines weren't even secured, even intensifying the failures of the machines with the vote flipping and usually in only one direction, the battery freezes in the midst of voters actually trying to cast their votes. And now we've got voter ID laws across the country, and we've got voter caging, which is a fancy way of purging people from the voter files. So now, what kind of election is it when neither of the political parties is addressing the issue, the fundamental issue of whether or not our votes are even going to be counted?
We're going to move on right now to the issue of free trade. John McCain.
Let me give you another example of free trade agreement that Senator Obama opposes. Right now, because of previous agreements, some made by President Clinton, the goods and products that we send to Colombia, which is our largest agricultural importer of our products, there's $1 billion that our businesses have paid so far in order to get our goods in there. Because of previous agreements, their goods and products come into our country for free. So Senator Obama, who has never traveled south of our border, opposes the Colombia Free Trade Agreement, the same country that's helping us try to stop the flow of drugs into our country that's killing young Americans. And also the country that just freed 3 Americans, that will help us create jobs in America because they will be a market for our goods and products without us having to pay the billions of dollars, the $1 billion and more that we've already paid. Free trade with Colombia is something that's a no-brainer. But maybe you ought to travel down there and visit them, and maybe you could understand it a lot better.
Let me respond. Actually, I understand it pretty well. The history in Colombia right now is that labor leaders have been targeted for assassination on a fairly consistent basis, and there have not been prosecutions. And what I have said, because the free trade, the trade agreement itself does have labor and environmental protections, but we have to stand for human rights, and we have to make sure that violence isn't being perpetrated against workers who are just trying to organize for their rights. Which is why, for example, I supported the Peruvian Free Trade Agreement, which was a well-structured agreement. But I think that the important point is we've got to have a president who understands the benefits of free trade, but also is going to enforce unfair trade agreements and is going to stand up to other countries.
Ralph Nader, 2 minutes. Your response on free trade.
There's no such thing as free trade with dictators and oligarchs in these countries because the market doesn't determine the costs. There's no free collective bargaining for workers. That's a crime de facto in many countries try to form independent trade unions. No rule of law, bribery. These companies can go there and pollute at will. There's no judicial independence to make these companies accountable when they abuse workers and consumers and communities, as the oil companies and the timber companies have on many occasions. Second, these NAFTA and WTO have to be scrapped. Under those treaties, we can withdraw in 6 months and give notice of withdrawal and renegotiate these agreements for the following purpose. No more trade agreements that subordinate consumer, union, worker, and environmental rights. These are pull-down trade agreements allowing fascist and corporate dictators to pull down our standards of living because they know how to keep their workers in their place at 50 cents an hour. So any new trade agreement should stick to trade. Any other treaties should be labor, environment, and consumer on a level playing field. These trade agreements also have to be open, democratic. They cannot undermine our courts, our regulatory agencies, and our legislature. That's what we got to do. And our website, votenader.org, has ample information on this process.
In order to get to the next subject, we're going to go right now to Cynthia McKinney on this, then we go to to break and one more topic. Cynthia McKinney.
Great. I agree with Nader that we need to repeal NAFTA and all of those so-called free trade agreements, but they don't constitute fair trade. And with respect to Colombia, I can say that not only have I been to Colombia, I have seen the devastation of the militarization of our policy, particularly with Colombia, and the displacement, particularly of the Afro-Colombian communities across that country. In addition, I would say that as a result of the unfair elections that have been held, particularly in Uribe, where there should, in Colombia, where Uribe was elected, there should have been an Afro-Colombian woman elected as president. Her name was Piedad Cordoba. But instead of being elected, she was kidnapped. And